It started with a slurred laugh echoing through one of the most heavily guarded streets in America. A visibly drunk man, loud, unsteady, and completely unaware of what he was walking into, stepped directly into the secure path of an approaching Secret Service motorcade. Within seconds, what began as a nuisance escalated into a confrontation that left the crowd speechless and the man with a lesson he'd never forget. Let us know in the comments which state you're watching from. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon in Washington, D.C., the kind of autumn day when the Capitol glows with quiet elegance. The American flags along Pennsylvania Avenue swayed gently in the breeze. Tourists snapped selfies near Lafayette Square. And beyond the black iron gates of the White House, business carried on as usual. But not everything would stay usual for long. Just outside the North Perimeter, the streets were cleared for a secure transport, what appeared to be a coordinated high-alert movement involving unmarked black SUVs and a squad of U.S. Secret Service agents on foot. Locals and visitors knew the drill. When those agents step into position, you clear the way. No questions asked. Leading the formation was Agent Daniel Hart, a 41-year-old veteran of the United States Secret Service. Over 15 years of service, including multiple international deployments and White House assignments, had shaped Hart into the very definition of calm under pressure. He wasn't just trained for conflict. He was built for it. His eyes were sharp, his jaw set, his suit immaculate. Every step he took reflected a deep respect for the badge he wore and the principles he protected. Behind that stoic face, however, lived a personal code even deeper than protocol. Discipline without ego and authority without abuse. As Agent Hart and his team began securing the route, bystanders instinctively stepped back. Some began recording with their phones, curious if they were witnessing a presidential motorcade. Children were pulled gently behind barricades. Police guided tourists to safe viewing points. And then, he appeared. From across the street, stumbling out of a side alley, came a man who clearly didn't belong in such a setting. His name, later revealed, was Harold Jennings, 38. A former semi-pro athlete whose life had spiraled following an injury, a lost contract, and a few too many nights with a bottle. To locals, he was that guy who talks to pigeons, or the one who tries to freestyle rap to strangers. To the Secret Service that day, however, he became a walking security threat. Wearing a filthy hoodie, scuffed sneakers, and a stars and stripes bandana loosely hanging from his back pocket, Harold lurched toward the road, beer can in hand, ignoring the visible security detail. At first, people thought he was just crossing the street, but then he stopped, right in the middle of the secure route, and turned to face the oncoming agents. He raised his arms dramatically and shouted, "Am I blocking something important, fellas?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous, uncertain. Agent Hart's eyes narrowed. His earpiece buzzed with chatter from the command center. Standard protocol dictated a calm response and a quick, controlled removal of the obstruction. But Hart knew from experience, this kind of man didn't move just because you asked politely. Harold staggered forward again, placing himself squarely in front of the lead SUV. One of the lower-ranking agents made a subtle move toward him, but Hart raised his hand, a silent signal to wait. Every move had to be calculated. Cameras were rolling. Tourists were watching. One wrong gesture, and the story could become something entirely different. "Sir?" Agent Hart called out firmly, not shouting, not aggressive. "You need to step out of the road." Harold looked around theatrically, holding his arms out like a performer. "What road? I see no road. I see freedom." The beer can in his hand slipped and rolled toward the edge of the street. The SUV behind Agent Hart slowed to a stop. Two agents took position near its flanks, scanning the environment for anything more threatening than a drunk man with a flair for drama. But the real threat wasn't violence. It was chaos. And in situations like these, chaos could escalate into panic. That's what Agent Hart had to control. The crowd began murmuring. Some people shook their heads. Others recorded, waiting for something viral to happen. A child whispered, "Is that man gonna get arrested?" Harold wasn't done performing. He walked up to the edge of the black SUV, tapped it with his hand, and said loudly, "Look at this fancy car. You boys really think you're better than the rest of us, huh?" A flicker of tension rippled through the agents. Agent Hart exhaled slowly and stepped forward. "Sir, this is a secure government operation. You are obstructing federal personnel. I need you to step aside immediately." Harold turned and squinted at him. "Who are you supposed to be? The Matrix?" A few people chuckled again, but it was the kind of laugh people give when they're unsure if it's okay to laugh at all. Hart didn't flinch. He simply stood his ground, his posture calm but commanding. Every inch of him radiated silent authority. And that's when Harold did something no one expected. He reached into his hoodie and pulled out a crumpled American flag bandana. He held it up and waved it mockingly. "I got rights too, pal. You can't tell me where to stand in my own country." The laughter stopped. The air turned cold despite the afternoon sun. Agent Hart remained perfectly still. His voice, when he spoke again, was lower, controlled. "You're waving the flag of a country built on respect. Step aside, sir." And in that moment, even Harold seemed to realize this man wasn't like the others he had taunted in the past. This wasn't a mall cop or a bouncer at a bar. This was the United States Secret Service. The first wave of seriousness hit Harold. It was visible in his eyes, how they twitched, how his grin faltered just a bit. The crowd sensed it too. But instead of backing down, Harold doubled down. He planted his feet and shouted, "Make me!" Phones rose higher. Whispers turned to gasps. The tension was no longer subtle. It was now palpable. And Agent Hart stepped forward. But what he did next would silence the entire street. The moment Harold shouted, "Make me!" the atmosphere on the street shifted from tense to electric. For a fraction of a second, everything stood still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Agent Daniel Hart didn't move. Not yet. His sharp eyes scanned Harold, recalibrating, analyzing. This wasn't just drunken behavior anymore. Harold was escalating the confrontation into something far more dangerous. He wasn't holding a weapon, but what he wielded now was disruption. And that, in a high-security zone, could be just as volatile. Hart took another step forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply existed with such presence that even some of the onlookers leaned back instinctively. "Sir," he said with measured calm, "this is your final warning. Step off the route, now." Harold took a long, dramatic sip from a second can he had hidden in his pocket and tossed it to the ground with a loud clink. "You don't scare me," he said with a forced smirk, though his eyes betrayed him now. He was sweating, blinking faster, fidgeting. His alcohol-fueled bravado was colliding with reality. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. "He's gonna get arrested. Dude is asking for it. What is he doing? That's the Secret Service." People began backing away slightly, just in case things turned ugly. At this point, Hart gave a subtle nod to one of the agents nearby, Agent Morales, a young but capable operative trained in non-lethal engagement. Morales began to quietly maneuver behind Harold, unseen by the intoxicated man who was now facing Hart, arms spread as if he were ready for a showdown on national television. Then, out of nowhere, Harold lunged forward. Not an attack, more like a stunt. He moved quickly toward the SUV again, pretending to block the driver's side, his hands tapping the hood. "Ooh! What's this button do?" he said, trying to open the door. That was the trigger. Agent Hart moved, not in anger, not recklessly, but with decisive, controlled speed. In 3 quick strides, he closed the distance, raised his right hand, and placed it firmly on Harold's shoulder. Step back. Harold turned his head slowly and met Hart's eyes up close for the first time. And something inside him cracked. For all his theatrics, Harold wasn't expecting that kind of calm dominance. There was no yelling, no shoving, just unshakable authority. His grin faded completely now, but it was too late. Behind him, Agent Morales had moved into position. In one smooth motion, he took Harold's arm and guided him back away from the vehicle. "Whoa! Hey! Hands off! I didn't do anything!" Harold protested, but there was no force, no aggression. The agents weren't there to attack. They were there to contain. The crowd fell silent. No one was laughing anymore. And then the real moment happened. As Harold tried to pull away and flailed lightly, he slipped, whether from the alcohol or from tripping over his own foot. No one could be sure. But what came next was utterly unplanned. Harold fell to the ground, directly in front of the lead SUV. Gasps erupted. The agents froze. The driver braked instinctively. Agent Hart immediately moved to cover the scene, signaling the driver to hold. Then he knelt next to Harold, not out of aggression, but with concern. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Harold groaned, clutching his side. I slipped, man." Hart didn't respond. He motioned to 2 nearby officers to come in. Within seconds, Harold was being lifted. Not roughly, not forcibly, but firmly and professionally, off the street. The crowd now watched with a mix of awe and discomfort. Phones filmed every second. A man next to the barricade whispered, "I thought they were going to tackle him, but that was kinda impressive." Indeed, the restraint shown by the Secret Service was something many didn't expect. In a moment where they had every reason to react forcefully, they didn't. They relied on discipline, training, and presence. Harold, meanwhile, was now fully sobering in the worst possible way: public humiliation. As 2 D.C. Metropolitan Police officers took him aside, Agent Hart returned to his post. The SUV convoy, delayed by no more than 4 minutes, was now clear to proceed. But something unexpected happened. Just as Hart stepped back into formation, the crowd began clapping. Not loud, not forced, but genuine. They weren't applauding violence or force. They were applauding restraint, professionalism, honor. One older woman near the front said aloud, "That's how you handle a fool." A teenager nearby nodded. He didn't even touch him, just stared him down. The moral weight of what just happened began to set in. Harold, now sitting on the curb, looked around. He saw the phones, the stares, the police officers talking to him like a child who'd broken something precious. And then he looked at Agent Hart, now silent, composed, standing with his hands clasped behind his back as if nothing had happened. Harold lowered his head. For the first time that day, he was quiet. But the story wasn't over yet. Back at the Secret Service Local Operations Center, surveillance of the incident was being reviewed in real time. Procedures were followed. Protocols were respected. And more importantly, the agents on the ground had handled the situation in a way that would set a public example. The senior supervisor on duty remarked, "Textbook execution." But to Agent Hart, it wasn't about textbooks. It was about the message. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't drawn a weapon, hadn't reacted with ego. And yet, he'd diffused a potential headline-making disaster without a single blow. For the Secret Service, that was a victory far more valuable than brute force. As for Harold, he wasn't arrested. The officers gave him a written citation and told him, "Go home, sleep it off, and next time, Think before you act." He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly. Then something even more unexpected happened. Harold turned around, looked directly at Agent Hart across the street, and gave him a small, sheepish salute. Hart didn't smile. He didn't nod. But he saw it. As the police officers led Harold gently away from the scene, a strange silence hung in the air. It wasn't the silence of fear, or shame, or even awkwardness. It was the silence that comes after witnessing something real. The kind of silence that lingers after people see restraint instead of rage, honor instead of humiliation, strength without violence. Harold sat on the curb, blinking hard under the bright afternoon sun. His chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. The alcohol in his system was fading, replaced now by adrenaline, embarrassment, and something he hadn't felt in a long time: accountability. He could feel the eyes on him, hundreds of them. Tourists, locals, Secret Service personnel, even a few nearby workers on their lunch break. And yet, the only gaze that mattered to him in that moment was Agent Hart's, still standing like a statue, hands folded calmly behind his back, eyes focused on the street ahead. Harold had made a scene. He'd blocked a secure route. He'd shouted, mocked, refused orders, and ultimately disrupted a sacred procedure in one of the most secure cities on Earth. And yet, he had not been tackled, not dragged away, not humiliated by force. Instead, the man in front of him had given him something more powerful than punishment. He had been given a chance to walk away, dignity intact, if bruised. Back at the Metropolitan Police Cruiser, an officer handed Harold a small bottle of water and said, "You got lucky today, man." Harold took it with trembling hands. "Yeah," he whispered. "I guess I did." "You guess?" the officer said, raising an eyebrow. "Do you even realize who that was?" Harold looked up, confused. "The guy you just messed with, that was Agent Daniel Hart, 15 years in the Secret Service, former counter-assault unit, protected presidents, visited war zones. That guy has stared down terrorists and foreign assassins, and you thought it was smart to taunt him?" Harold didn't respond. He just looked down at the pavement and exhaled a long, shaky breath. Across the street, the Secret Service detail had resumed their position. The convoy, though briefly delayed, was now secure and moving again. As the black SUVs pulled away and turned the corner, Agent Hart gave a brief hand signal to the rest of the team. Disengage, maintain watch perimeter. One of the younger agents, Morales, approached him quietly. "You okay, sir?" Hart nodded. "Situation handled," he replied, voice even, calm. "You didn't even flinch. That was something," Morales added. Hart glanced over at the crowd, which was still gathered in small clusters, murmuring and filming. "I wasn't protecting the route," Hart said. "I was protecting everyone's faith in the way we do things." A few hours later, the video clips began to surface online. One TikTok user had posted, "This man just disrespected the Secret Service and got silenced without a single punch." The video had over 700,000 views by nightfall. Another wrote on Twitter, "That agent didn't even raise his voice. Pure dominance. Professionalism at its finest." A veteran watching from home replied, "That's what real strength looks like. Respect to Agent Hart." The incident was picked up by a few news blogs under titles like, "Drunk Man Confronts Secret Service. Agent's Calm Response Goes Viral. Tense Moment in D.C. Ends with Unexpected Lesson in Discipline." But none of them truly captured what those on the street had seen with their own eyes. That in a world so often defined by aggression and shouting, there was still room for quiet strength. That evening, Harold Jennings sat alone in a city shelter, the citation still folded in his jacket pocket. He stared at the wall, sipping coffee that was too bitter to enjoy but too warm to waste. His mind kept playing the scene over and over, the voice of the agent, the restraint, the gaze that cut through him more than any punch ever could. He had lived a loud life, always making noise, always testing boundaries, and most of the time the world either ignored him or fought back. But today was different. Today someone had responded not with force, but with command. He looked down at the table and muttered to himself, "That man didn't have to say anything. He just stood there and made me feel like I wasn't the man I thought I was." He had embarrassed himself, but deep down, he was grateful. The next day, something remarkable happened. At around 11:15 a.m., while the Secret Service detail was prepping for another routine sweep along the same route, a man approached from the edge of the sidewalk, calmly this time, carefully. It was Harold, sober, showered, wearing clean clothes. One of the perimeter officers stepped toward him. "Sir, you need to stay on the sidewalk." Harold held up both hands. "I'm not here to make trouble. He paused. "I just wanted to say something to the man from yesterday, the tall one, Hart." The officer narrowed his eyes. "Wait here." 2 minutes later, Agent Hart stepped out of the staging area. He looked at Harold without judgment. Harold cleared his throat. "I was out of line yesterday. Completely. I don't know what I was trying to prove, but you didn't react the way I expected. You didn't humiliate me. You didn't hurt me. And I just wanted to say, thank you." Agent Hart said nothing for a long moment. Then he spoke, measured and firm. "Just remember this, Mr. Jennings. Respect isn't a currency. You don't get more of it by shouting louder. You earn it through how you carry yourself." Harold nodded, eyes damp. "I know that now." Hart extended a hand, not stiff, not cold, human. Harold shook it. For both men, it was a quiet, powerful moment of understanding. No cameras, no crowd. Just mutual acknowledgement that redemption often begins with accountability. Final reflection. The story of Harold Jennings and Agent Daniel Hart didn't become a front-page scandal. There were no lawsuits, no violence, no arrests. And yet, it became one of the most shared moments of quiet heroism the Capitol had seen that year. Why? Because it reminded us all that real strength doesn't scream. It doesn't need to push, or threaten, or dominate. It just stands, disciplined, measured, grounded in something greater than ego. Agent Hart's response to chaos wasn't to overpower it, it was to remain unshaken by it. And in that unshakable presence, an entire crowd, and one lost man, found something they didn't expect, a role model. This powerful moment reminds us all that true respect is never demanded. It's earned through discipline and honor. How would you have handled this situation if you were Agent Hart? Let us know in the comments. If you appreciated this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another dramatic moment of courage, discipline, and honor. Right here on Authority Watch.